We are finishing this Gospel of Mark sermon series. Last week, at the end of chapter 15, we saw the truth that Jesus is the Son of God who died for sinners. That's the main theme of the entire book of Mark from the very first verse. So Mark chapter 1, verse 1 will be on the screen. The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Jesus is truly 100% God. He is also truly 100% man. He died on a cross for sinners. And so, the message of Mark is, see that and believe. See and believe. And if I say that I believe, then I follow him. That's part of faith, is following. Today is also called Resurrection Sunday, also called Easter. Not a trick question. Easter. Now, although every Sunday is about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that's what every Sunday is about, today is the Sunday of Sundays. That's why I'm dressed up, apparently, in this suit. Today is the glorious day that Christ was raised from the dead. And why this joy, why this celebration about Jesus rising from the dead? Well, it's because he first died, he was crucified, he was executed, he was buried in a tomb, in a rock cave, but he didn't stay dead. The tomb wasn't occupied for long. No, he was raised from the dead. So the resurrection of Jesus Christ means everything, okay? Or you can say everything, all big caps, multiple exclamation points. Everything for Christianity. Without the resurrection, does Christianity, think about this, without the resurrection, does Christianity have anything important to say? If Jesus stayed dead, does all of this matter today? Now, sadly, there are people who claim a Christian identity, but they deny the resurrection happened. Have you met anyone like that? Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But it's true. There are people who claim to be Christian, but they do not believe that Jesus rose from the dead. I'll give you an example here. Listen to these words that'll be on the screen. These are words in an interview with the New York Times given by the president of Union Theological Seminary in New York City. So this lady says this in an interview. This is about 4 years ago. There's no resurrection story in Mark, just an empty tomb. Those who claim to know whether or not it happened are kidding themselves. For me, the message of Easter is that love is stronger than life or death. That's a much more awesome claim than that they put Jesus in the tomb and 3 days later he wasn't there. For Christians for whom the physical resurrection becomes a sort of obsession, that seems to me to be a pretty wobbly faith. What if tomorrow someone found the body of Jesus still in the tomb? Would that then mean that Christianity was a lie? No. Faith is stronger than that. So this seminary school president of a school that teaches and trains pastors and missionaries, says the resurrection of Jesus Christ is obsessive fiction, it's not needed for Christian faith, and that the Gospel of Mark that we've been going through doesn't mention Jesus being raised from the dead. What do you think about her claims? Does she make valid points? Is her understanding about the Gospel of Mark correct? Well, let's take a look at this final chapter in Mark and see what Mark actually has to say, the author. So let's begin in verse 1 of chapter 16. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they could go and anoint him. Very early in the morning on the first day of the week, they went to the tomb at sunrise. Now, the Jewish Sabbath ends at sundown on Saturday. Jews still practice that today. So these ladies, when the Sabbath finishes, then go and buy spices to anoint Jesus' body. And what's the purpose for this anointing? Well, it's not because Jesus is alive. No, he's physically, bodily dead. And how do these ladies know that Jesus is a dead corpse? Well, if we go back one chapter, Mark 15, verse 37 and 40 say this: Then Jesus let out a loud cry and breathed his last. And then Mark 15:40, there were also women watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the younger and of Joseph, and Salome. In Galilee, these women followed him and took care of him. Many other women had come up with him to Jerusalem. Now, one reason we know that the resurrection of Jesus is true, is factually true, is because the very first witnesses were women. Now, in our 21st century world, that doesn't seem like a big deal. Well, a lady saw it first, okay, cool. But in the first century, when this happened, this was huge. Because both the Jews and the Romans, they didn't accept a woman's testimony in a court of law. Did you know that? In fact, one Roman historian who hated Christianity, he wrote that it was hysterical, stupid, to believe that what a woman says is true. So at that time, if you're creating a false religion, then you would never have women involved. You never mention ladies, and if you do, you make them look foolish. Because you can't trust the woman if you're a good Jew or a good Roman citizen. That was the culture of that day. But what do we have here in Mark 16? We have the names of how many women? 3, thank you. 3 women who planned to perfume the body. We have the very first 3 witnesses to these events. And there are no men to be found. So the 2 Marys and Salome prep on Saturday night, and then early Sunday morning they walk over to the tomb. And how early is it? Well, verse 2 tells us that it's so early that they arrive at the tomb when the sun is just peeking over the horizon. Now, before we go on, I need to mention another important fact. The reason why Christians worship on Sunday is because Jesus was raised from the dead on a Sunday, first day of the week. Verse 2. Christians, we do not observe a Saturday Sabbath because Sunday is the Lord's day for worship. So anyone who says that Saturday is the worship day is not following biblical historic Christianity. And that person then, if anyone who's making that claim is then dismissing how central the resurrection is. So let's imagine, okay, let's just think about this here. These 3 women, as they are making their way, walking over to where Jesus is buried, carrying the spices, it's very early. They woke up before dawn. It's probably still dark as they're making their way. They don't have flashlights, right? They don't got cell phones. They don't have street lamps to guide them. It is dark. And so they are looking down at the ground to avoid tripping over rocks and branches and whatever. And then as they are walking, they realize they have a problem. Verse 3. They were saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone from the entrance to the tomb for us?" Looking up, they noticed that the stone, which is very large, had been rolled away. All right, so what are these ladies talking about? How awesome it's going to be to see Jesus alive? Right? Easter, it's Easter. It's exciting. We got egg hunts, spring colors, chocolate. Yeah, Easter. No. They all know that Jesus is dead. So for them, walking to the tomb, it's like going to a family funeral. So they're not full of joy. They are sad. They are grieving. They are hurting. And then what happens? When they look up, they are suddenly surprised. The large stone that covered the tomb entrance has been what? Rolled away. Okay, did they go to the wrong tomb? Did they get lost? Because there are people, some people who deny the resurrection, they will say that these women went to the wrong place. They'll say that the ladies were confused in the dark, and they ended up in a different location because it was so dark. I don't know about you, but that sounds sexist to me. Don't you think? But these ladies, they didn't make a mistake. No. They walked to the correct place. They were not geographically challenged. How do we know that? Well, Mark 15, verse 46. After he bought some linen cloth, Joseph of Arimathea, took Jesus down and wrapped him in linen. Then he laid him in a tomb cut out of the rock, so it's a cave, and rolled a stone against the entrance to the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, were watching where he was laid. So Mary and Mary both saw where Jesus was buried. They were not geographically challenged. They knew exactly where to go. And since Jesus is dead, it's not as if that his body will just float somewhere else. But now, we've just read here, in front of the tomb, these ladies are shocked. Somebody moved the stone during the dark. And at sunrise, they can see that the sunlight that's getting brighter and brighter is shining directly into the tomb. So we go to verse 5. When they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side. They were alarmed. Now, if it wasn't shocking enough that the giant tombstone was rolled away, now they see a dude dressed in white, and this person is sitting where Jesus' body was supposed to be. All right. Is this young man a ninja? All right, he's wearing a white ninja, I guess. Or is this guy Jesus' body double? Like what, movie actors, movie stars have? They have body doubles, do the stunts for them? No, this guy is what? An angel. How do we know he's an angel? He's wearing a white robe. Remember, these ladies are not expecting Jesus to be alive. They saw him die. They saw where he was buried. So it's natural for them to be alarmed that his body isn't there anymore. I'm thinking in reading this that they are speechless in their shock, like jaws drop. What is going on here? And then the angel gives them one more surprise. Verse 6. Don't be alarmed, he told them. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified. He has what? Risen. He is not here. See the place where they put him. So on this Resurrection Sunday, 2023, what's the main truth here from Mark chapter 16? Jesus was raised from the dead. Jesus was raised from the dead. Okay, repeat after me. Jesus was raised from the dead. Turn to someone near you and say, Jesus was raised from the dead. I'm going to look at the camera. Jesus was raised from the dead. Now, remember the person that I quoted earlier? Right, this seminary school president lady who denied that Jesus was raised from the dead? I'm going to read again a few words that she said. It'll be on the screen. There's no resurrection story in Mark, just an empty tomb. Those who claim to know whether or not it happened are kidding themselves. All right, so what's the response to this school president lady? Thank you. That's what the angel says. Jesus is raised from the dead, which means what? There is a resurrection story in Mark because we're reading it right now. And we can claim to know because this is more than just a story. No. This is real life facts, real life history. This actually happened. It's not just a story. We have eyewitnesses to the death and burial and resurrection of Jesus. Without these first witnesses, we would know that Jesus was raised from the dead. And it's a joke, and it's not a joke, to make this truth claim. Who raised Jesus from the dead? Did he come back to life like a zombie? Was he reanimated due to a fungus in the brain like a popular video game and HBO show? Well, Acts chapter 13 tells us this. Since the residents of Jerusalem and their rulers did not recognize him or the sayings of the prophets that are read every Sabbath, they have fulfilled their words by condemning him, Jesus. Though they found no grounds for the death sentence, they asked Pilate to have him killed, and when they had carried out all that had been written about him, they took him down from the tree and put him in a tomb, but God raised him from the dead. God the Father raised the Son of God from the dead. God rolled away the stone from the tomb entrance. God raised Jesus from the dead. But we really need to ask this question on this morning. Why? Right? Why should we care? Why should I care on this Easter morning? What does it really mean for us that Jesus was raised? Well, here's one reason why the resurrection matters. Jesus was raised from the dead so that we can believe in him. Now, in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus 3 times predicts his death and his resurrection. 3 times he says that he's going to be killed, but then later he's going to be raised from the dead. So here's the third prediction. Mark chapter 10 on the screen, verse 33. The Son of Man, so Jesus is talking about himself, will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death. Then they will hand him over to the Gentiles, and they will mock him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him, and he will rise after 3 days. And then later, when Jesus tells his disciples that they're all going to desert him, abandon him, when he tells Peter specifically that Peter will deny him, Jesus also says that he will be raised from the dead. So Mark 14, verse 28, but after I have risen, I will go ahead of you to Galilee. So if Jesus wasn't raised from the dead, then he's a liar. He's a fake, counterfeit. And we shouldn't give a care at all about anything he says in the Bible. Who cares if he's still dead? So, when Jesus tells us to love God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength in Mark chapter 12, foolish. He's dead. Love your neighbor as yourself, or do unto others as you would have them do unto you, the golden rule. A waste of time. He's dead. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow Jesus. Dumb. He's dead. But since Jesus was raised from the dead, since Jesus is alive right now, we can believe in him. We can trust what he says. 1 Peter chapter 1:21 says this, through him, Jesus, you believe in God who raised him from the dead and gave him glory so that your faith and hope are in God. Here's a second reason why the resurrection matters. Jesus was raised from the dead to confirm Christianity is true. I'll read again from the interview that I referenced earlier, what this lady said. On the screen again. For Christians for whom the physical resurrection becomes a sort of obsession, that seems to me to be a pretty wobbly faith. What if tomorrow someone found the body of Jesus still in the tomb? Would that then mean that Christianity was a lie? No, faith is stronger than that. Is she right? Can Christian faith continue to exist if Jesus wasn't raised from the dead? Is it a wobbly faith to believe in the resurrection? Well, here's an answer from the Bible. We read this earlier, 1 Corinthians 15. If Christ has not been raised, then our proclamation is in vain, and so is your faith. And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is what? Worthless. You are still in your sins. Those then who have fallen asleep in Christ have also perished. If we have put our hope in Christ for this life only, we should be pitied more than anyone. So if Jesus wasn't raised from the dead, then Christianity is the worst lie ever. Christian faith is worthless, pointless. And all Christians everywhere, we should all be pitied because we are a bunch of religious idiots and morons for believing something that did not happen. But Christianity, unlike any other belief system out there, stakes its claims on facts and history. I'll say that again. Christianity, more than any other belief system out there, stakes its claims on facts and history. Christianity is not true because we believe in a legend or a myth. Christianity is not true because of some fairy tale faith or wishful thinking. Christianity is true because the resurrection is real. Jesus was really raised from the dead. Here's a third and final reason the resurrection matters. Jesus was raised from the dead to forgive sinners and offer living hope. Now, forgiveness of our sins is not possible if Jesus is still dead. Sin still wins if Jesus was not raised. And we have 0% hope if the body is still a corpse. But the Bible tells us that we can be forgiven. The Bible tells us that we can have hope. We can have new life, meaning, purpose, joy, peace today. Romans chapter 4 says this, He, Jesus, was delivered up for our trespasses, our sins, and raised for our justification, forgiveness. 1 Peter chapter 1 tells us this, Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Because of his great mercy, he has given us new birth, new meaning, purpose, life into a living hope through the what? The resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead and into an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you. The good news from the Bible is the reality that forgiveness is possible. Sinners can be justified and declared good and righteous by God. People can be born again into a new living hope, and forgiveness and hope are real because Jesus was raised from the dead. So then, what should we do with this central truth of Christianity? How should you and I respond to this morning? Well, here's one way. Because Jesus was raised from the dead, don't be alarmed, but believe. Verse 6, again, tells us this. Don't be alarmed, he, the angel, told them. You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they put him. Now, if you would not consider yourself a Christian this morning, or if you don't believe that Jesus was raised from the dead, can you explain what happened to the body? Is there a reason the tomb was empty instead of a resurrection? Because if you don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead, you have to give an alternate explanation that makes sense. Now, friend, if you are not a Christian, you don't need to be alarmed. You don't need to be shocked. You can trust today that Jesus was raised from the dead. You can believe and you can have a relationship with him, with Jesus today. Because Jesus offers a better life for you, for all of us, than the one you currently have. He was raised from the dead so that you can be forgiven. You can have living hope that will never, ever fade away. Here's a promise from the Bible, Romans chapter 10, verse 9. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So, if you want to confess with your mouth today, if you want to believe in your heart this morning, you can follow these words that will be on the screen. So as I read this, you can follow along. Dear God, I know that I am not worthy to be accepted by you. I don't deserve your gift of eternal life. I am guilty of rebelling against you and ignoring you. I need forgiveness. Thank you for sending your Son to die for me that I may be forgiven. Thank you that he was raised from the dead to give me new life. Please forgive me and change me that I may live with Jesus as my ruler and Savior. Amen. Now, if you have questions, you wouldn't consider yourself a Christian, you're wondering about Christianity, you have questions, please consider joining us for lunch later. Ask questions. Let's talk. Or talk to a Christian that you know. You know a Christian, bug them, let's talk. You don't know a Christian, you don't want to talk to anyone else, come contact me. I'd be happy to talk with you this week. Now, for those of us who follow Jesus this morning, the stone was not rolled away so that Jesus could get out of the tomb. It's not as if Jesus was stuck in the grave, in the cave, and just trapped. I can't get out, I can't get out. No. The stone was moved by God so that we could see the empty tomb and believe. And let's remember that the good news, the gospel rests upon the death and resurrection of Jesus. So 1 Corinthians 15, verse 1, now I want to make clear for you, brothers and sisters, the gospel I preached to you, which you received, on which you have taken your stand, and by which you are being saved. You hold to the message I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I passed on to you as most important what I also received. What's most important? That Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures. So the Bible tells us that Jesus Christ was raised from the dead. Both the Old Testament and the New Testament tell us Jesus was raised, and this is the most important message. This is the gospel, the good news. Listen to these words written by a seminary school professor who actually believes in the resurrection. Nothing is more central to the Bible than Jesus' death and resurrection. The entire Bible pivots on one weekend in Jerusalem about 2,000 years ago. Attempts to make sense of the Bible that do not give prolonged thought to integrating, combining the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus are doomed to failure, at best, exercises in irrelevance. So if I believe the good news this morning, if I believe Jesus died for my sins, I believe that he was buried and carried my sins away, and if I believe that he was raised from the dead, then I have a commission from Jesus, a mission. I have a command from him. And it's this: go and tell. Go and tell. Back to verse 7. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there just as he told you. Verse 8, they, the ladies, went out and ran from the tomb because trembling and astonishment overwhelmed them. And they said nothing to anyone since they were afraid. Now, it shouldn't be surprising that these ladies freaked out and ran away. Because one minute they were expecting what? A dead Jesus. And then suddenly, he's alive. And so it makes sense that they were afraid, they are terrified. Who's this guy dressed in white? So they just run away. Like, I don't know what's going on here. But later, they went and told others. How do we know that? Well, because if they didn't tell anyone, then the Gospel of Mark wouldn't have been written. If they didn't tell anyone, Mark would not have heard the good news. If Mary and Salome didn't go and tell, then the disciples would not have heard. And if the disciples didn't hear the news, then they would not have gone and told themselves. And if the disciples of Jesus did not go and tell, the rest of the Bible would not have been written. Nobody would have heard the good news. People would still be dead in their sins. There would be no forgiveness from God. And if they did not go and tell, all throughout the centuries, nobody would have heard the truth. And that means, get this, that all of us here and watching who believe today, we would have never heard. Because faith comes from hearing the good news. And hearing requires someone going and someone telling the good news. I seriously doubt anyone here, anyone watching who believes in Jesus today, that you just randomly woke up one morning and you started to believe. You wake up, I think I'm going to believe in Jesus. No, someone went to us. Someone told us the news. Someone told me the good news that Jesus died for my sins, that he was raised from the dead. And then I heard the news, I received the truth, and I believed. Christian sisters and brothers, how about us this morning? Do we care to go and tell the good news that Jesus was raised from the dead? Do I want others to hear the good news and believe and be saved? If it's a yes, who's the one person that I should tell? Who can I talk to about Jesus before the summer ends, or before the summer begins, excuse me? If these ladies in Mark 16 did it, we can do it too. But maybe this morning we are afraid to go and tell. Maybe we are afraid people will reject us. Maybe we're afraid someone will laugh at us for believing that Jesus was raised from the dead. A guy came back to life? Yeah, right, you're a fool. Don't tell me that. So maybe we are afraid today, this morning. I mean, I don't know if I want to tell because they might look at me funny and call me whatever. Well, if that happens to us, it's okay. It's okay because the same failures happened to the disciples too. So, for example, Acts chapter 17 tells us this. Since then, we are God's offspring. We shouldn't think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, an image fashioned by human art and imagination. Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God now commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has set a day when he is going to judge the world in righteousness by the man he has appointed. He has provided proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some began to ridicule him, but others said, "We'd like to hear from you again about this." So when we go and tell, people will ridicule us. They'll make fun of us. But there might also be people who want to hear from us again. So let's go. Let's tell the good news that Jesus was raised from the dead. I want to finish by reading again from the interview with this seminary school president. Here again, what this lady says is the message of Resurrection Sunday. She said this: "For me, the message of Easter is that love is stronger than life or death. That's a much more awesome claim than that they put Jesus in the tomb and 3 days later he wasn't there." Can I tell you a person who would seriously disagree with her? Peter, the guy who denied Jesus not once, not twice, but 3 times and betrayed his Lord. Peter, the disciple who promised to follow Jesus but then ran away and abandoned Jesus. Peter would disagree with this lady. Peter would not say that love is stronger than life or death. Peter wouldn't say that love is a much more awesome claim than Jesus dying in an empty tomb, because he contributed to Jesus' death. Love is super shallow if someone died because of me, and then I never see them again. That's really shallow. Who cares about love when people die and stay dead? But in verse 7, what does the angel say? Go and tell not just the disciples, go and tell who? Peter too. Why mention his name? Because Peter probably thinks he's not a disciple anymore. He thinks he's the biggest failure. He doesn't deserve love from God from all that he has done and said. He thinks that he can never, ever be forgiven for all the horrible stuff that he has said and done. And we know about all of his sins as we've been going through the Gospel of Mark. But we know that Peter was forgiven by Jesus. We know that Peter knew the love of God. How? Acts chapter 2, 32. God has raised this Jesus. We are all witnesses of this. Who spoke these words? Peter did. Peter spoke these words. And these words can be spoken by anyone here today and watching. These words can be spoken by everyone who believes. So if I think that there is absolutely no way that God could forgive me, that God could love me, if I feel that I have messed up too much in my life, that I don't have any purpose or meaning, look at Peter. Look at the grace that God shows to Peter. Look at the mercy that Jesus displays to Peter. Because Jesus was raised from the dead, I can experience God's love today. So no matter how each of us have come into this place this morning, or each of you have come watching in this morning, know that Jesus was raised for people like us. Know that we can receive His love, His mercy, His grace through faith today. Be encouraged. Jesus was raised from the dead. Hallelujah. Romans chapter 8, verse 11. And if the Spirit of Him who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you, then He who raised Christ from the dead will also bring your mortal bodies to life through His Spirit who lives in you. Let's pray. Father, we thank you and praise you this morning that Jesus was raised from the dead. Lord, this is not just some imaginative thing or some fictional story. We believe, we know this is fact, this is true, this is history. Jesus really, truly, physically, bodily was raised from the dead. This makes all the difference in the world. We know, Lord, that if the grave was still occupied, the tomb was still filled, then we are just wasting our time here today. But since Jesus was truly raised, we know that this is true. Christianity is confirmed. It is true. We can believe in Jesus. We have hope. We have forgiveness today through faith in Jesus Christ. Father, the reality may be on this morning that one or two of us who say that we believe, maybe we're not feeling it, and we're just going through the motions. May it be, Lord, today that we would just be sparked again in our heart that this is momentous, crazy, awesome, good news. Father, there may be others of us this morning who feel that, how could we ever believe? How could we ever trust because of our past or our present or a circumstance that we're going through or our hang-ups, and maybe we feel like we're a big screw-up. Maybe we feel that we have so many questions, we have a lot of doubts. But Lord, if you had grace to Peter for all the mess-ups that he had done, Father, you have grace for all of us here today. Lord, may it be on this Resurrection Sunday that we can just run to you again in faith and love and hope and joy and say, hallelujah. Thank you, Savior, for rising again, giving me new life. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let's stand as we sing.